You want to know what really haunts her? It's not the man who begged, not the one who over-explained, chased, or tried to fix everything after she left. It's the man who said nothing, the one who walked away calm, unbothered, unreadable, like she never had a grip on him in the first place. See, women don't obsess over closure. They obsess over the lack of it. And that's what this video is about. The 7 silent triggers that keep echoing in her mind long after you're gone. The ones that make her replay the moments, question the ending, and feel your absence like a shadow she can't shake off. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. Because once you understand the power of masculine detachment, you stop chasing, you stop convincing, you stop bleeding energy just to prove your worth. And the shift is massive. You go from being another guy she dated to the man her nervous system keeps searching for in every conversation, every scroll, every night she can't sleep. You want to leave a mark? Stop trying to explain yourself. Just become the kind of man who knows exactly what his silence does. Let's break down these 7 triggers. And if you feel this deep in your gut already, drop a comment that says, "I don't chase. I echo," because real presence doesn't disappear. It lingers. Number 1, emotional stillness after distance. Most men react when a woman pulls away. They reach out. They try to fix it. They ask questions, overanalyze the silence, and chase answers that were never meant to be given. But the man who haunts her is the one who stayed emotionally still when she drifted. She expected confusion. She expected sadness. She expected a reaction. But instead you gave her stillness. Not anger, not coldness. Just a calm, grounded emotional presence that didn't flinch when the connection shifted. And that's what breaks her rhythm. Women are emotionally intuitive. They feel energy, tone, hesitation. They're trained to read between the lines. But when your emotions stay steady, when you're not pulled into the storm she thought she could start, she starts to question everything. Did I even matter? Why isn't he reacting? Did I misread his feelings completely? That emotional stillness does something loud. It shows her she was never in control. And in that space, when there's no drama, no resistance, no pursuit, she becomes the one holding the weight. See, your lack of emotional turbulence forces her to feel her own. That's where the haunting begins. Because a man who reacts tells her she still holds power. But a man who stays still, that's the man whose presence she can't decode. And the human mind is wired to obsess over what it can't understand. Don't confuse this with silence out of bitterness. This is silence born from emotional command. You're not shutting down. You're just no longer available to be emotionally pulled by someone who couldn't hold space for you. And that truth, it doesn't just linger, it echoes. Let's move to the second trigger, one that lives in the space between what she wanted and what she never got to say. Number 2, she never got full closure from you. Women say they want closure. What they really want is control over how the story ends. They want the conversation, the explanation, the emotional unpacking of what went wrong, not because it heals them, but because it gives them the upper hand in the final chapter. But when you don't give her that moment, when you walk away without a speech, a fight, or an open door, she's left standing in emotional silence. And that silence is louder than any conversation. Closure feels good in the moment, but it removes tension, and tension is what memory is built on. The man who explains everything is forgettable. The one who leaves her with questions, that's the man who lingers. She doesn't know if you're hurting. She doesn't know if you ever cared as deeply as she thought. And more than anything, she doesn't know if you'll ever say what she's hoping to hear. That emotional unfinishedness plays on a loop in her mind. It's the open tab she can't close, the itch she can't reach. Every time she replays the ending in her head, she's looking for something, but it's not there, and that not there becomes obsession. See, the human mind is wired to complete patterns, and when you break the pattern, when you leave before the emotional puzzle is solved, she keeps searching for the missing piece. You didn't slam the door. You didn't ghost her. You simply stopped giving her access to the emotional version of you she once thought she understood. That's what closure was supposed to be for her. The chance to define what you meant. But when she never gets to define it, it defines her. And it keeps defining her long after you're gone. Let's move on. Because the next silent trigger doesn't come from what you said. It comes from what you never stopped doing. And it cuts deeper than anything she expected. Number 3. Your routine didn't collapse without her. You want to know what really shakes her? It's not anger, not sadness. It's watching you continue your life, fully functional, fully focused, completely unshaken. That's when the story she told herself begins to crumble. She expected to see a version of you unraveling. The man who texts late at night, the one who spirals, misses her, falls apart quietly in the background. But when your routine stays intact, when you hit the gym, handle your work, stay disciplined, level up in silence, that stillness feels louder than any goodbye. Because it tells her something she didn't want to believe. He wasn't depending on me for his center. And that thought, it's destabilizing. See, there's a subtle ego in every relationship. She liked feeling needed. She liked feeling like your emotions were somehow tied to her presence. But when she left, and nothing broke in your life, the mirror reflected something she didn't expect. You weren't emotionally collapsed. You were composed. And that is what haunts her. Because now she's forced to ask, was I even that important? And the more she sees you moving forward, not posting quotes, not acting out, just living, building, improving, the more your image grows in her mind. Not as the man she left, but as the man she underestimated. Emotional regulation is rare. Discipline under heartbreak, even rarer. And when you keep your focus strong, your presence grounded, and your actions clean, she starts to realize she didn't just lose you. She lost access to the most stable man she knew. And that realization doesn't hit once. It hits every time she watches you grow without needing to explain a thing. Let's keep going. The next trigger is where obsession begins, because it's not about your silence. It's about the evolution she now has to watch from the outside. Number 4, you changed after she left and got better. Growth hurts more than revenge, especially when she's not a part of it. See, most men break down after the breakup. They spiral. They stay stuck in the emotional mud. They post quotes, drop thirst traps, or chase validation from every direction. And women expect that. But when she sees you transform, quietly, consistently, without ever mentioning her name, that's haunting. Because now she's not dealing with the man she left. She's watching a stronger, clearer, colder version of you emerge. Your posture changes, your presence sharpens, your energy is calmer, but it carries weight. And maybe you're not showing it off, but she sees it. In the pictures, in the people you're with, in the way your silence now feels like strength, not distance. And here's the part that really stays in her head. She helped shape that growth, but she doesn't get to benefit from it. That's the emotional knife she can't remove. Because she may have left thinking she was upgrading, but now she's realizing you were the upgrade. You didn't post it. You didn't announce it. You became it. And women don't just remember the men who made them feel good. They remember the ones who became everything they ever wanted after they let them go. And now, every time she sees a glimpse of you, online, in passing, through someone else, that new version of you doesn't just remind her of the past. It reminds her that she's no longer part of your future. Let's move to the next one. A silent trigger that hurts her ego more than her heart. Because you didn't fight. You didn't explain. You just walked. And that is unforgettable. Number 5. You didn't block, beg, or explain. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's the presence of power. After a breakup, most men either react emotionally or play defense. They beg, they plead for clarity, or they block her just to prove they're done. But you did none of that. You didn't chase, you didn't collapse, and most importantly, you didn't explain yourself. That's what makes her spiral. See, when a man begs, it tells her she still has control. When he blocks, it shows her she still affects him. When he over-explains, it gives her emotional closure on a silver platter. But your indifference, your clean, calm, disciplined withdrawal, that's not rejection, that's emotional command, and that's rare. She might have checked your messages expecting one last thread to pull on, but you never sent it. She might have looked for an emotional reaction, but all she found was quiet. And that's what echoes. Because you didn't make a scene. You didn't demand her attention. You let her feel the weight of your absence without turning it into a performance. That's the kind of presence she can't argue with, because there's nothing left for her to push against. You became unreadable, not to punish her, but because you simply understood your value didn't need defending. And deep down, she knows it. She knows she wasn't blocked, but also knows she's no longer welcome. She knows you're not mad, but also senses you've already outgrown the conversation. And that's what keeps her checking, wondering, overthinking, because you left no door open, but also never made it clear what's locked. That mystery, that control, it's not just haunting, it's unforgettable. The next trigger takes this even deeper, because now she's not just thinking about you emotionally, she's obsessing through the lens of curiosity. Number 6. You became unreadable on social media. Social media used to be her window into your life. She could watch from a distance. She could decode your moods, interpret your stories, track your movements, even after the breakup. But then something changed. You stopped oversharing. You stopped reacting. You stopped being visible in the way she needed to feel in control. And suddenly, you became unreadable. No emotional quotes, no sad playlists, no vague captions or stories she could manipulate. Just clean, distant, intentional silence. Maybe you post a photo, but it reveals nothing. Maybe you're online, but never watching her stories. Maybe you disappeared altogether. And that's when it starts eating at her. Because now, she's in the dark. And curiosity is the seed of obsession. She starts wondering, what is he doing? Why is he so calm? Is he seeing someone? And the more she doesn't know, the more her mind fills in the blanks. You don't need to fake anything. In fact, the less you reveal, the more power you hold. Because women aren't just drawn to attention, they're drawn to patterns. And when the pattern of your presence breaks, she feels it. She doesn't just miss you, she starts investigating you. But the problem is, there's nothing to grab onto. No handles, no clues. And that's exactly what drives her deeper into obsession. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to hurt her. You're just living with precision. And that makes her spiral in silence. Because a man who can disappear emotionally, physically, and digitally is a man she can't track, can't manipulate, and most importantly, can't replace. The final trigger is the deepest, because it's not about what you did. It's about what she lost, and now can't find again. Number 7. She felt safe with you, and that feeling is gone. She'll never admit this out loud, but what she really lost when she lost you wasn't attention, wasn't effort, wasn't time. She lost safety. Emotional safety isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's the silence between words where she felt understood. The way you held your frame. The way you never needed to control her, because you never needed her to complete you. The stillness of your energy when she was overwhelmed. And whether she realized it or not, she relied on it. You were the grounding force. The one man who didn't try to match her chaos, but stood unmoved by it. That kind of presence, it doesn't come often. And now, without it, she feels unsettled. Maybe she's with someone else. Maybe she's dating around. But nothing feels as secure, because most men chase her moods. You didn't. Most men try to fix her feelings. You didn't. You just gave her space to be. And now that it's gone, she feels the void in places she didn't expect. In conversations that feel forced. In silence that feels empty instead of peaceful. In the tension of trying to rebuild with someone who doesn't carry the same stillness you did. Because here's the truth she's slowly realizing. It wasn't just that she loved how you made her feel. It's that she felt safe in who she was around you. And that's rare. So now she replays everything, not just to remember, but to feel that safety again, even if only for a second. But the more she remembers, the more she realizes it's not coming back. Not because she can't reach you, but because she no longer has access to that version of herself. And that's the final silent trigger, the pain of knowing she had something rare and let it go, thinking it would be easy to replace. Let's close this properly, because these aren't just triggers. They're the emotional fingerprints you leave behind when you live like a man she can't decode. Most men think they need to say something to be remembered, but the men who haunt her thoughts are the ones who said nothing and still changed everything. These 7 silent triggers aren't about playing games. They're about presence, about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need permission, attention, or validation to stay centered. Because when you stop chasing closure, when you hold your emotional line, when you grow instead of collapse, she feels that in her mind, in her body, in the quiet moments when she scrolls through her phone, hoping to feel what she once did with you. You didn't block her. You didn't explain yourself. You just became unreachable, not because you disappeared, but because you elevated. And now, she doesn't just miss you. She misses the version of herself that felt safe around you. And that kind of loss, it sticks. If you felt this, if you've lived this in silence, drop a comment below and write, "She lost peace, not just a man." Because when a man truly knows who he is, he doesn't need to be remembered. He's impossible to forget.